incredibly.
DOGE has smashed into the offices of the Social Security Administration with more extreme prejudice than an Antifa crowd hopped up on USAD Monday. That's what we're talking about today.
David. I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Like that. Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Welcome back to another episode of Human Reaction. This is our special Tuesday episode recorded from elsewhere outside the studio. David, you're still in Helena. How are things going up there?
Just trucking along, trying to get legislators on board with Defend the Guard. It's been very interesting. And, I'm undefeated so far. I've never gotten an argument I couldn't come back against, but a lot of legislators who are afraid. They're kind of scaredy cats sometimes. So trying to give them courage. What
are they afraid of?
Opposition saying that they don't support the military, that sort of thing. Although this doesn't harm the military, so it's ridiculous. But that's what campaign ads do.
Yeah. Well, I am sure if anybody in Helena can bring them to their senses and give them a little bit of courage, it'll be you. And don't let us down. All right, we're counting on you.
I'm trying.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the story here. We are going to stop and play through a couple of clips to see how the mainstream media is reacting to DOGE just absolutely smashing and burning everything they can possibly get their hands on in the U.S. government. So we've got this clip here from NBC. We'll start with this.
This morning, there are new developments in the Trump administration's push to reshape the federal government. Another department is now facing scrutiny from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
NBC News has learned that the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration, Michelle King, stepped down over the weekend after she refused a request from DOGE to access sensitive data of millions of Americans at the agency.
David, I'm curious. All of the agency heads that are stepping down after refusing to admit DOGE into their records, are these like martyrdoms? They're all just like, I refuse, I'm not going to do it. And then they're like going to just, take their leave at that moment in protest. Is that kind of what we're seeing here?
I suspect that's what's really going on here. Is it has less to do with the actual fear of anything and more that they see the media narrative and they want to feed into it. They want to make sure this is as punishing for the Trump administration as possible. So then they can do the news circuit and say, I resigned or I was fired by Donald Trump. What a bully is he, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. All right. Let's keep going.
That is according to two sources familiar with the situation. Well, the White House later confirmed that King was no longer head of the agency.
NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins us now. Aaron, let's start there. What are we hearing from our sources, also from the White House, just about this resignation? And just tied to that, what's the information that DOGE is looking for here?
Well, Joe and Savannah, good morning. The Social Security Administration is in charge of managing payments for more than 70 million Americans. We know that President Trump has promised not to cut benefits from that particular agency as they're doing this work across the federal government to make cuts. One of the sources familiar with King's resignation in particular said that some of the information involved here in this dispute included bank information, Social Security numbers, birth dates, and in some cases medical records as well. King retired instead of giving up that information. She refused to let Musk's team access those sensitive government documents. Again, that's according to two sources, and the White House has confirmed that she is no longer the person in charge of that agency. We know that the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, gave an interview last night where she talked about this, and she said that the president has directed DOGE teams to identify fraud at the Social Security Administration. There was an anecdote from Elon Musk last week when he spoke in the Oval Office where he said that there was at least a case where someone was collecting Social Security benefits who was 150 years old. So that sort of offers an example of what they describe as waste in that agency.
Okay, so on that note, I think a lot of people have probably seen by now the tweet or the post rather on X that Elon put out on, I think it was Sunday night, detailing this huge list of all the different age brackets and the number of people in each one that were that had their death field set to false, otherwise basically meaning they're still alive and eligible to collect Social Security. And I'll pull that tweet up right now. So what do you think is the cause, David, for for this, all these people being eligible over the age of 100 or 120. There's like 16 million people there.
Right. So I assume the easiest framework to think of the cause is ineptitude, right? Just not actually caring about your data system much, not doing the basics of scrubbing your data and ensuring data quality. Note that this program is very old, right? It's been around since the 1930s. So it's going to, you got to have a lot of records that are moved. You got a lot of legacy systems from when it was on floppy disks, I'm not even sure how much of this is even in cloud computing. From what I've heard is that cloud computing still really hasn't made its way into the federal government. They're still hosting things on their own servers and such. So it's a real, it's probably a question of just not caring, right? Because what I assume is that these aren't pays, right? These aren't people paying out. These are probably just the people in the system, which just shows, I think a lot of people online have kind of misinterpreted that, but it is an indication of the data quality of just what we're looking at. Like, does the government know what it's doing? Question. And obviously it shows it doesn't.
Well, and obviously the secondary concern there is if there are, I think, something around 392 million people listed in this range, that's obviously 50, 60 million more people than we have in the country in total. Right. So there's a lot of wiggle room in there for some of these payments to be going maybe to somebody's mailbox who's been dead for 20 years. And Who knows where that money is going. So there's a lot of room for fraud in there too, don't you think?
Yeah, I assume that there's probably some checks on the payout side that probably prevent some of that. But, that's what we're doing this whole exercise for, is to find out what is the quality of the data systems, where can we automate, and how can you make it more efficient and less fraudulent? So if that's the project, I don't see what the problem is, especially if what you're doing is tweeting out for the public, hey, here is how bad the data is. And that's all they're doing here. And of course, that causes apologia and outrage.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I remember when we discussed Vivek leaving DOGE, because Vivek's focus was more going to be litigation and Elon's focus was more technological. I can see now through the work that DOGE is doing, how difficult it would be for those two things to coexist with, especially such a lean team as they have right now. It would really divide focus and resources. And I think this is a place where obviously we're finding out day by day that the government needs a lot of improvement when it comes to this stuff. And there's a lot of holes for things to fall through the cracks where taxpayer money could be going to nefarious places.
I totally get that point. I think while you might miss a more cohesive strategy of being able to attack on both fronts, this focus strategy is working well as far as for exposing what we want exposed out of a government efficiency organization. And obviously it's being met with the full force of the Office of Personnel Management and Budget and the administration to really cut back. And, a lot of this is going to be, play out in terms of can you win the media war afterwards? And it's a good question about whether or not we are. But let's get back to the clip and we can kind of see how NBC's covering it.
Sort of offers an example of what they describe as waste in that agency. Levitt did say that his team has not dug into the books just yet, Joe and Savannah, but they do expect that they will find some waste and potentially fraud at the Social Security Administration.
Aaron, all this comes as mass layoffs across the government are continuing. We know nearly 300 employees at the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, have been fired. We're also learning that the Department for Homeland Security is planning to fire hundreds of senior leaders this week. What can you tell us about all this?
Yeah, I spoke with the FAA union yesterday, and I understand that there were just under 300 of their members who received these termination letters over the weekend, and they were talking about people who work as maintenance mechanics, environmental protection specialists, aviation safety specialists. The union president there expressing concern that this is going to mean an overloaded workforce is going to be even more overloaded as some of these positions have been cut. And this is an agency where people have already been stretched thin. At the Department of Homeland Security, our understanding is that the administration is about to cut some of these top positions. These people who've been in career positions for a long time at the agency, high-level folks. They're getting ready to get rid of them at some point this week because they don't really align with the administration's goals.
How do you feel about that, David?
Well, we're back to the old school loot system, right? Where every time a new administration comes in, you purge everybody out. And this is, not something that is unique to the Trump administration. We know that the Biden administration did similar things, but maybe not on the same scale and not with the degree of transparency. They did it by vaccine mandates. Yeah,
fair point.
So I don't see this as a unique evil. I think it operates on the predicate of the progressive myth that if you just put the smart people in charge, they'll just administrate society neutrally, not politically. And that's just a silliness. It's just a ridiculousness.
Yeah. There have also been reports of, everybody from, park rangers and Forest Service employees and other government employees being fired this last week. And obviously the media is awash with their sob stories of losing their jobs. And I don't want to be insensitive to that. It's a terrible thing to lose your job. I understand that that's, definitely a concern for a lot of people. How should we be digesting some of that stuff?
Yeah. Well, and keep in mind that this includes 8 months of, severance for many of these people. Not all the firings. If you straight up do insubordination, you might get fired and not get that. But all these people are offered a substantial package.
Now, are all these people getting that package? Because as I understood it, Trump gave a certain window for them to accept that severance in exchange for their resignation. And I don't know if that window has lapsed by this point or if all of the people that are being fired have actually accepted that. Do you have clarity on that?
I don't think we know, but I wouldn't suspect that we'll see that window close. They'll extend it or they'll keep going as long as possible because the last thing they want is a bunch of federal employment lawsuits.
Right.
And that's always been the challenge, right? That's always been the issue of cutting government is it's always been, even if you have an administration that wants to, they really can't because there's so many rules and bureaucracy and union contracts and BS that go into this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm sympathetic to anybody who loses their job. I understand that. On the other side of it, it was in government. And this is the nature of government. And we are currently drowning in debt. So, this is the austerity. Would you rather see this austerity or would you see the austerity of cutting back on social benefits?
That's a great question. And I think that's the part that progressives miss, as they highlight all these individual stories, which, again, every single person has, a family potentially or, obviously bills to pay. And so it's terrible to lose your job, especially if it's without any sort of severance or support down the line. But you can't overlook the fact that the pain and suffering for everyone will be much worse when the U.S. government defaults on this ballooning debt if we don't get this under control. Mm-hmm. So at this point, it's sort of it's at least maybe a little bit more surgical, even though it probably doesn't feel that way to most people.
Yeah, and I don't know, like it actually, the rules make it harder to be surgical, right? It's easier to do mass layoffs than it is to do individual layoffs. So these are the rules that they design.
Yeah.
Very fair. Yeah.
Very fair. Let's keep playing.
For the Department of Homeland Security and the many agencies that are a part of that particular department. This source said that the Trump administration has a centralized plan and a list of names that it intends to work with to make these cuts across that agency. And these are not folks, we understand from one source, who have job performance issues or who are being cut as a result of an effort to downsize that agency. This is people who simply are not aligned with what President Trump wants that agency to be doing, Joe and Savannah.
And Aaron, on this President's Day, we saw a lot of pushback and protests to President Trump, right?
You're right. There were protests across the country to what DOGE and its team members are doing across the federal government. We saw this happening in many cities. You see an example here in Atlanta.
What's left of them.
I want you to hear what some of these folks are concerned about. One of the people we talked to, I believe he was in Washington, D.C. Listen.
I'm worried about the power that Elon Musk has been given without any kind of election. and kind of running over everybody. That's a big concern. I'm worried about, I have a lot of family and friends that are federal employees or depending on grant money to do research. So it's impacting me personally.
Now do inflation. That's the trick, right? Is that this is all these jobs, all this spending is inflationary. It's new money entering the system through the Fed that is affecting everybody. And finally, the golden parachutes in the federal government are finally getting a taste of what everyday Americans taste all the time when they get laid off from a job, when there's cutbacks, when there's an overextension. And now you got to cut back in order to have some pain up front so the company persists. And like, once again, with all the sympathy in the world, you have to negotiate reality too. And, those kind of stories, I get the lady there. I'm sure she's completely acting in good faith. But, just remember what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a private business or some greedy corporate CEO who just wanted to cut a bunch of employees so that they get a better check. We're not talking about a progressive issue like that. We're not talking about, corporate corruption. What we're talking about is the federal government actually trying to balance its budget.
Do you think it'll get there?
No.
But we have to try, right? We do.
Yeah. Well, it has to be paired with an appropriations process that actually cuts the budget to really do it for real. The executive actions are of status, at least, a minimum of gray space. It's going to be a battle. And they're hoping that they can just do as much as they can before they get completely bogged down in the courts, I assume. And that's kind of the sad state of affairs, but it's a state of affairs that they created when he faced rank insubordination across all of his agencies last time he was president. So if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here, but we are because you guys.
Once again, carrying the theme from last episode, the Dems started it. That's the nature of it on all these stories, from election denial to everything else. It's always this, time slice bias that sets everything right now is everything that's ever happened. Yep. Let's keep going.
So, Joe and Savannah, conversely, I think it's worth pointing out that there are people who support what President Trump is doing and what Elon Musk is doing to downsize the government, to identify, as the president has said many times, waste, fraud, and abuse. And they think that these cuts have been long needed. Guys?
All right, Aaron, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news.
That they did not show the DOGE debt clock there. Right? They didn't talk about any of the savings. Even if it's not I don't know if it's a reliable number or not, but whatever it is, right? They didn't interview somebody who was on the other side of that issue. There are lots of people who take an interview, talk to NBC, happy to, but they're going to just interview the lady with the pink hat who claims that all their friends are losing their jobs. Yep.
And there's the DOGE debt clock. We're seeing it at least on usdebtclock.org, 110, almost $111 billion right now.
That's pretty great. That's
bad.
Better. That's better than I thought it would be. I had extremely low expectations. So good on them.
Well, so what do you think? Have you heard it all? I know this just happened today, or at least the news just broke today that Elon is floating the idea of paying all American taxpayers a DOGE dividend with about 20% of the total estimated $2 trillion that DOGE is expected to save over its lifetime. What do you think about that idea?
It's good politics. Makes sense. Can't afford it, but good politics.
That was my first thought, was like, no. You keep it. Just balance the budget, make the government not collapse.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But you know what? You're right. It's good politics because all of the people and I have some in my life who are, crying over the fact that now the U.S. isn't offering foreign aid to other countries, that people are going to starve or die of diseases. They can now go take their DOGE dividend and they can send that straight to Africa or wherever it is that they feel like in the world is suffering the most without the United States involvement. And then it's private charity, right?
Yeah, and they get the added benefit of that charity not being connected with U.S. State Department goals to overthrow the country that they're giving it to. So hey,
it's a win-win.
all wins. No, I get it. You know, it's funny because I've been getting a lot of Democrat legislators who are very concerned about the impact on foreign aid on with Defend the Guard and like deployment of National Guard to help out other countries if they need it. And it's just kind of this, and this the meme, right, of the moment for their side. It's the people don't care about the rest of the world and stuff like that. And the only distinguishment between me and them is I think it should be private charity because it probably wouldn't result in the overthrow of that country's government or the censorship of their people.
Yeah.
Or funding the heroin fields, like these little things, like less opium in the world might be a good thing,
Might be a good thing.
Market.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Shall we move to our second clip of the day?
Yeah. We're going even deeper into the liberal hole here with an interview with MSNBC from the former Social Security Administration commissioner.
Joining us now is former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. Most recently, though, he was the Social Security Commissioner under President Biden. That's exactly why I wanted to talk to him today. So, Governor, when we talk about DOGE accessing Social Security data, what's your understanding of what they want access to exactly?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't even think they know what they want exactly. I mean, every day.
What kinds of things could they get access to?
Well, what they could get access to is personal identifying information, yours, mine, where we live, what we've earned, what our benefits are, who we live with. I mean, all sorts of personal identifying information that is actually a crime to browse. In fact, when I was the commissioner, President Biden's commissioner of Social Security, if an employee was browsing personal identifying information without any claimant business purpose to it, that was a fireable offense, and frequently something that we would refer people to the Office of Inspector General.
Okay, so he's acting as if DOGE is not a government agency. What are we doing here? It's so
David,
stupid.
there are 19-year-olds just running amok with your personal data right now.
Oh, yeah, he's going to get there. But I mean, just think about the absurdity there. Every time you go to the DMV, you got to give them all your information. Every time you pay taxes, you're giving the government all their information.
Dude,
I don't. So this hill for the progressives to die on, I just don't get it. I just don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me because
I saw a tweet today.
2 seconds of thought. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say 2 seconds of thought, and you realize if you know anything about what's happening, if you're not just watching MSNBC, you'll be like, wait a minute, I kind of give the government my information all the time, so why would I be worried about this? Seriously,
yeah. Every time you fly, right, the TSA gets all the information that it wants about you. I mean, shit, TSA knows what size underwear I wear, all right? But no, I saw a tweet that made it make a lot more sense today, actually. And I think it does come down to this. It's not that they're worried about, that DOGE is going to have our personal information. It's that it's going to get access to their personal information, what they've been doing with all this money for the last however many years. And I mean, obviously, I think that's why so much of the progressive establishment has been so upset by DOGE, is because obviously it's cutting off the faucet of money that they've been using for regime change and for lining the pockets of themselves and their friends and family. I mean, Chelsea Clinton getting some ridiculous amount of money from USAID. I think it was like $20 million. Like, what did she do? Give a speech? It
was the Clinton Foundation to be technical.
I saw Chelsea Clinton specifically, but I know the Clinton Foundation did also. I can verify that. But
no. Well, it was
nevertheless.
Yeah. She put out a thing. It was like, I don't get any money from my foundation. This is all foundation money used to save people, right? But that's always the scam. This is what the scam is, right? And then you can write off flights and you can write off your dinners and your benefits and into the foundation. That's what foundations exist to do for many people, especially the wealthiest. So yeah, I know. I'm not trying to take away from your point. I'm only saying that this is always these layers of obfuscation to create the environment that you want, because what you're doing is dirty and behind the scenes.
Yep, you nailed it. Let's keep going.
For criminal prosecution, of course, the co-presidents Musk and Trump have done away with the inspector generals of all of the agencies. it's hard to say where that would be referred. But I'm not sure exactly what they want. But I do know is that they're
wait.
Governor, when we
shit. You're not sure what they want, sir?
You don't know what the business purpose is? They don't have a legitimate business purpose to try to find waste, fraud, and abuse? Under your administration, sir, were you just not that worried about it? Like, what? You couldn't do this?
Oh, I think they've been pretty transparent about what they want. I mean, I'm just going to go out there on a limb and say
there has to be, in order to do their thing, right? Which is, and note, the co-presidency. The goal there is to play on Trump's ego to get him to get rid of Elon. Right. So then he doesn't have the cover of Elon's media machine that's kind of arose on X, which is now the number one used social media platform. I saw something about that. Maybe that's apocryphal. I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, that's the goal. Right. And so they play on that. They make him seem untrustworthy. They're trying to drive Elon's numbers down by saying, you don't know what he's going to do with this information. Be very afraid. As if, like he's a government employee like all the other government employees get my information. What are we talking about here?
Totally. Well, and the other line that I've started to see trotted out, and I don't know how pervasive this is amongst the legacy press, is that, the fraud that they've discovered here or there, this little slice of money is like some fraction of the amount of money that taxpayers pay to SpaceX every year, for Elon's, rocket project and all of the negative externalities that come with what he's doing. If a rocket blows up in the air, then there's all this debris and it's got to be cleaned up, or it shuts down airspace, blah, blah, blah. So they're really trying to like focus it on him and say like, oh, well, we're giving Elon $30 billion a year. And, how dare he come after this other money when we're giving him that? It's like,
Well, God forbid somebody who's actually serving the public actually has a private business, right? That doesn't justify any subsidies for SpaceX. I don't care. I oppose those. Fine, whatever. But he is the number one communications company for the U.S. military.
Right. And he's taking astronauts to and from the International Space Station for NASA.
Yeah.
And has been rescuing and like dealing with the fallout of Boeing falling down on their obligations. So if we want to talk about the amount of money that the government is paying to a particular contractor, let's talk about Boeing, or let's talk about Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin or Raytheon. Right. And I know that the DOD is next, and Pete Hegseth has opened the door to DOGE to audit the Pentagon, and that's going to be amazing. Actually, on that note, what do you think about the Fort Knox thing that's happening right now? Rand Paul and Elon talking about auditing the U.S. gold reserves.
Yeah, that will be very interesting. I'm very curious what's going to happen there. Now, there have been audits, but not, if I understand, not independent audits, and there's a lot of question about them. But I haven't looked deeply enough to know, what's there as far as, do we have an evidentiary standard for understanding that there is assets in the gold reserve? But we don't use the gold reserve anyway, so I don't know why it's going to make a lick of difference, because we abandoned the gold standard, internationally at Bretton Woods in the 1970s. So what are we talking about here?
It seems like the prevailing narrative around why it is important is because it is a significant component of just international confidence in the U.S. dollar, right? Like that we have this huge stack of gold.
I don't believe for a second that people buying treasury bonds or hoarding U.S. dollars overseas are doing so because they're really convinced that the government's got the gold for it. I mean,
true. But if it wasn't there, would you feel more or less confident in the United States?
That's a good point. I mean, would it scare the markets? I think it would. Would it create a great conversation on monetary policy? Yes, it would. I totally agree. Yeah.
And the other piece of it is, the reserves are still being valued at, I think, like $50 an ounce. So if they decided to basically float the valuation to market rate, which I don't see why you wouldn't do that, it would substantially increase the value of that asset on the U.S. balance sheet. Not even close to anything that would, start to touch the national debt. I think it'd be like $860 billion or something was the last figure I saw. But I don't know. There seems to be a lot of interesting things going on in the gold market. It seems like the market itself is very interested in what happens from this audit. And if it discovers, if we discover that all the gold isn't there, then that might have a significant shock to the market price of gold internationally and might send people scrambling to get their hands on some. I don't know.
Yeah,
not financial advice. Do your own research.
Yeah, definitely not.
Now, what they ultimately want to do with it, who the hell knows? I don't think they know. They have a bunch of, 19-year-old nitwits up there from DOGE that are rummaging around in personal data. What the end game is, I'm not really sure. It is already, Social Security is already the most efficient insurance corporation, private or public sector in America today. They operate with a 50-year low in staffing on less than 1% overhead. So who knows what they're up to? It
So
can't
the
be
White
good.
House. The White House is saying, and Garrett alluded to this, is that they're doing this to root out fraud. That's the reason that they're throwing out there. But there is an Inspector General report from 2023 that says improper payments are less than 1% of payouts. Internal estimates put it at about $72 billion over 8 years, so about $9 billion a year. It's significant, but it's actually a small percentage. Is that
Correct.
the real fraud? Like, what are they chasing here?
I don't know exactly what they're chasing. When I was commissioner, we would gather the deputy commissioners around the same table, and every 2 weeks on an agile basis, we would look at what the biggest threats of fraud were and how we can deter, prevent, get in the way of that fraud. What we found when we were there, when I was there, is that the biggest threat was actually people who are trying to, steal people's identities in order to kind of hijack Mrs. Kaczynski's check and send it to a different bank account. So that was the biggest instance of fraud that we were looking at. It is a large agency.
So,
What do you think?
okay, so if you really think about it, when he was commissioner, all of these people who are not dead were marked down as alive, or at least that are in the system as alive, when they're obviously, unless they're vampires, are dead. So if he's this big, there's no fraud going on here, and $9 billion is the best we can do. Hey, don't get me wrong, 1% is a really great, I'm sure, fraudulent rate compared to other government agencies, and maybe even according to insurance. I don't know. But if your data sucks, that creates avenues for fraud. If someone is 349 years old and that's indeed a payout, that would be because someone was committing fraud. If they're paying in, that probably means because they're an illegal immigrant. And that probably represents a non-trivial amount of those numbers that we're looking at. Is it's probably people who have stolen a Social Security number of someone who's deceased, figured out a way to signal that they're still alive, and then paid into the system so that they could get their paychecks non-cash.
Interesting. So your suspicion is that a lot of those $50-60 million, the overage in our total population, are migrants that have stolen Social Security numbers.
Yeah, and people who have passed and just never got marked down as false. I mean, that could be most of it, and some of it's the illegal immigration question, or vice versa. I really wouldn't be able to say, but I mean, just keeping with some humility on what we know. We really don't know that much, but we do know that there's substantial legacy problems in these systems. And that they're just way behind on trying to update these things. And that's the job that he's taken on. So maybe we get to the other side of this and all we get is some software improvements to make it so that one person can handle more cases without fraud going forward. Maybe that's what we get. And there is no real systematic thing they can do to save money in Social Security. Well, great. Then we've won. It means we can just do it on less employees, which is efficiency, right? And so maybe the progressives are completely right. And this is the best run organization of taking in money and sending out money, which is not exactly a hard job. I would imagine, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure the fraud investigation, the stuff like that, the forensic accounting, it's got to be tough. And I imagine there's specialists there who deserve their job and doing a great job, and maybe they're doing the best they can do. But you have to step back and ask the bigger question, right? Which is, how do we bring these legacy systems into the modern world so that we can create that efficiency?
Completely. Yeah. And I think even if that is all that we get, like you said, I'd be happy with that. I would be really happy with that. Frankly, I'd be happy to find that there wasn't any fraud. That'd be awesome. I mean, I'm sure there is some somewhere, and we're going to find it. And obviously, we've already found some within USAID. And I think that, the bigger fish to fry will be the Department of Defense, will be Medicare and Medicaid. And I mean, if we get that far, the Federal Reserve would be amazing. to just crack that thing open and look inside. I just want to know what's going on in there.
Yeah. And one thing on his nitwits at DOGE, I just wonder to what degree, because that they're young programmer types, the average age is like in the late 20s or something like that. And because they're operating with somebody that he doesn't like, that he would find it completely unobjectionable if Elon Musk was a career academic with no prior, function of addition to the economy had ever made in his life. It'd probably go over completely fine, right? If all these people were just regular government bureaucrats paying their union dues, it'd probably completely fine. But because it's a Republican administration, because it's Elon Musk who's ticking them off right now, because, the context of it, that's all that really matters here. This is all just kabuki theater in order to hide what they're really concerned about, which is, this slush money. And I want to know, and this is not, this is brand new and it hasn't been verified yet, but there were some indications of payments out of the Social Security Administration to Ukraine and Ukrainian addresses. Yeah. So, and I don't know what that is. So we don't know anything about it, but I mean, that's off the government website there. There's something going on there. What's going on there? That's something worth investigating.
Absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. Oh, that's wild. Yeah. Foreign individuals. I saw that. I didn't see specifically Ukraine, but I saw that foreign individuals were being mailed Social Security checks. People in other countries, not certain that they were U.S. citizens living abroad necessarily at all. Just said foreign individuals. So I suppose
that's why you might need to take a peek at that personal identification. That he somehow thinks it's somehow sketchy that you could look at. Right? If you're doing an investigation, you need the personal information, man. Come on,
you do.
Yeah.
And to the young people thing, it feels a little bit like some cranky boomer just saying, get off my lawn, Sorry, dude. But you haven't done the best job of running the government and you brought this on yourself, right? Yeah. I'm staring at a debt clock up here. It's $36 trillion. Had you done a better job, we wouldn't need to be here. Sorry.
Totally.
Actually,
yeah.
Let's keep playing.
So any sort of overpayment, underpayment mistake can have large numbers to it. But as you pointed out yourself, the percentage compared to the size of the agency and the number of people who depend on Social Security as a lifeline is actually pretty small. In fact, unlike the Department of Defense, year in and year out, Social Security gets a clean audit from, this year, last year, I think it was Ernst & Young who was hired to do the audit. And every year they receive the SEER award from the Association of Government Accountants because of their openness, their transparency, their clarity of their reporting.
But I think you bring up there, Governor, something that's really important, which is that DOGE or the Trump administration are not the first people to look through and make sure that this agency is functioning and paying out money to the people that it's supposed to. Most recently, that job fell at your feet, or very recently, rather. So I think as people are looking at this reporting around what might be happening within Social Security, what would you say to people who are on that program, watching this, looking at that reporting? What should they do here, if anything?
Here comes the fear mongering.
They being whom? The people that
they
work
being
there?
People who are on Social Security.
Oh, I think we should all be anybody who depends on Social Security, and there are many. I mean, half of all seniors living alone depend entirely on Social Security. So these guys are men and women from DOGE. I think they have no idea of how fragile this agency is. I mean, Social Security today serves more customers, active beneficiaries than ever because of baby boomers like me now being in the ranks of the retired. And yet, because of House Republican cuts, they are doing so with staffing that's already been reduced to a 50-year low. So the biggest threat to Social Security right now is that the co-presidents, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, drive 10,000 people out of the agency, and those benefit checks get interrupted.
What do you say to that, David?
So
what happens then?
USAID had 15,000 employees, and they believe they can run the agency with 200 something, right? Or was it 300 something? Regardless.
It's just under 300.
Yeah, a small fraction. Now, possibly Social Security could be run that way. It's thinking like a government person that is the problem here. A government person says, I need one person per check. One person, they take the check, they hand it to another bureaucrat who takes it and writes the new check and sends it out. That's how Social Security works, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ponzi scheme. So therefore, I know they tell you that it's your money, but it's actually money that goes out to the people who are retired right now. So I wonder to what degree we could put that on rails, and just automate a lot of this process and focus more on fraud detection.
I completely agree. It just reminded me of, did you see the cave where they keep the government records?
The cheese cave? Yeah.
The cheese cave where the employees ride around on tricycles gathering employee records, like some crazy like Gringotts Bank out of Harry Potter or something.
Gringotts, yeah.
It's like, I think Angela McArdle tweeted that reference and I lost it. That was good. It just, it's like, oh my God, you're living in the actual dark ages. You're keeping records in a cave. I get it. Maybe it's secure. It probably is. I'm sure it's secure.
If we get attacked by a nuclear weapon, Joe, how would we keep all the government employee records safe? That's the question. You can't have them online in a server under the ground. You got to have all the paperwork.
Look, if we had fewer government employees, we wouldn't need such a large cave. That would probably save a lot of money right there.
Think of the rental cost of the cave. I just can't even on that, man.
Oh boy. Yep. All right, let's finish this thing off.
That's the greatest threat to Social Security now. The other stuff they spew out there about zombies getting checks and 200 million dead Americans getting checks, all total horse hockey. Not true.
Horse hockey?
But what is true is that they can crater this agency. They can do it very quickly, and they have likely no idea how fragile this already depleted and overworked agency is. They're about to find out, though.
There.
So I wonder why it's so fragile. Why are our government systems
great question.
so fragile? Why is it that the smallest little thing can just break everything? Because that, by definition, would be a bad system. Because it, by definition, would be a system that is unable to reform itself, is unable to move, is unable to adjust to new realities, such as new technology, and therefore efficiency.
It sounds like the government to me.
Yeah, it sounds like it's what are those? It's like an animal. It's like a shark is the same kind of animal. Alligators and crocodiles are too. Where like everything else evolves, but it just stays the same in its ecological niche forever, and it never really changes. It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah. I'm still wrapped up with horse hockey. I looked this word up. Apparently, it has fewer than 0.01 occurrences per million words in the modern written English language. He might have made it up on the spot. That might have been the only occurrence ever.
Yeah, he might want to say horse shit, but he's on regular television, so therefore, no.
Well, David, I'm going to be honest. All of the pleasantries and sympathy aside, I am thoroughly enjoying myself. And I have a feeling that our viewers are as well, watching this process unfold. And I just wake up every day excited to see what DOGE has uncovered.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting journey, right? And not something I thought I'd see on this scale, on this where you'd think it'd be something that you would find on like some dusty government report of like, we did this much stuff like 3 years into the presidency, rather than every day, real time, happening on every level. And that's just so encouraging for the current moment. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it was possible, not with Donald Trump. I just didn't think he really had it in him to really care about that. But this DOGE thing is working, and I think it deserves people's support. And I do want to note, there's no guarantee that we win this media war. There's no guarantee that the narrative war goes our way. In the long run, it could turn against the president, could turn against Elon Musk. If people don't, do something about it, right? If regular people don't say, hey, I like this, and start pointing that out and add into that narrative and make things take off. It isn't enough just to be on X. There has to be real push in other mediums, because that's where all the voters are at.
Right.
Even though it's the largest social media platform, it still doesn't encapsulate the actual voter electorate.
All great things. I think everyone that watches this show, at least, is excited to see what's happening. I, for one, am very excited to see what happens when we get even deeper down the rabbit hole, again, into the Pentagon, maybe into the Fed, maybe into Fort Knox. That would all be amazing stuff. And so far, it looks like the legal battle that the left has been mounting against this effort has not been successful. We have an article here I just saw this evening from Zero Hedge. Not enough. Obama-appointed judge denies request to halt Musk access to U.S. agencies. Judge Tanya Chutkin denied a request for a temporary restraining order which would block Elon Musk's access to certain government systems and limit DOGE's capabilities to make changes in reducing government spending. And she wrote that basically there's just not enough. There's not enough evidence. The plaintiffs have not provided enough in order for her to reliably halt this. Now, I wonder, and final take from you, David, before we wrap up. We've seen this happen, I think, at least twice now. One was for the severance thing, right? They put a temporary injunction on it, but I believe it was allowed to go through. We've seen this one. There may have been others. Do you think that these Obama-appointed judges, or generally like left-leaning judges who the opponents of DOGE are going to with these claims to try to get DOGE stopped, are reeling in their activism from the bench because of fear of, maybe in some way having reprisals against them by the administration?
It's pretty difficult to do a reprisal against a judge. They're so insulated as a branch. But that said, there is legitimate. I mean, the judicial system isn't perfect. I'm one of its biggest critics. But there is a question of your reputation as a lawyer, as a judge, and how much that matters if you want career progress going forward. And if you're overly biased, it could mean the end of it. I mean, that's true within that profession. I mean, it's not perfect, but it is one of the bulwarks of the judicial system that could limit some of the worst abuses. If you notice, a lot of the stuff I've seen so far on these cases, they come from judges way out of the way in small courts. They're not coming from the major circuit judges because they have a lot more pressure because they're a higher court. So I see a lot of these delaying actions, frustrating actions. I don't see them as the kind of knockout punch that the left wants to make them.
Right. Yeah. Well, hopefully they don't land one, because I want to see it all keep going, and I'm sure you do too.
Keep going, Doge.
Keep going. On that note, this has been another wonderful remote episode of Human Reaction. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. Follow us and subscribe on whatever channel or platform it is that you're watching or listening on. And of course, if you want to join in on the conversation, you want to share articles and memes and all that fun stuff, join our Discord server. The link is in the description below. We would love to have you join the community. It's growing every day, and we love engaging there. So thanks for watching. For David Rand, I am Joe Sheehan. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com.